If we look at the targets the industry is setting for itself, reducing emissions, going carbon neutral, then halving the emissions as they were at 2005, how ambitious do you think they are in reality?
I think they're very ambitious, particularly, I mean, they probably get more ambitious as time goes on. So, between now and 2020, 1.5% fuel emissions efficiency target. I think that one is should be fairly easily achievable. But then when we talk about carbon neutral growth after 2020, that's quite a stretch. And then, of course, halving our emissions output against 2005 levels by 2050, that is going to require a real leap.
Will airlines like yours be able to actually meet those targets, or is it going to be a case of when we get there, we need to review and maybe change them?
What's going to be necessary, I think, is that everybody plays their part. The airlines, no one airline, the airline industry as a whole can't do it without a lot of help from other parties, governments, manufacturers, navigation service providers, airports. It's got to be a team effort. But what we're saying as airlines is, look, we've got to, as an aviation industry, we've got to commit to this, and we've got to make it happen. No, I mean, you can't. If you change a target when you find it hard to reach, then it's not a target, is it? These are hard commitments, and we've got to meet them.
And what about when you compare the aviation industry with other industries? Do you think you're reaching further, or are you sort of going along with what other industries are trying to do as well?
I don't think there's another industry in the world that's made this sort of commitment. I mean, an analogous industry would be the shipping industry, for example, and as far as I'm aware, they've done nothing like this. So I think we are really showing the way here, showing the way forward and the way things can and should be done.
How important is government involvement in all of this?
Absolutely critical in a whole range of different areas. Infrastructure provision is an obvious one. Another one is we really need governments to set some targets to the manufacturers of the equipment that we use. Rather, as they've done for motor vehicles, for example, there are emissions targets which manufacturers have to make. We need governments to set stretch but achievable targets for our suppliers so that they can provide us with the equipment that we need, and so on. I mean, quite clearly, this is going to need a lot of government involvement and commitment and understanding if we're going to get it done.
Do you think governments are moving fast enough?
No, I don't. And of course, the reasons are obvious. It's very political. It's political within each state, and it's political between states. But I'm an optimist, and I think that governments will eventually recognise the need for the whole world to pull together and to do something about this problem. Otherwise, we won't have a future.
Talking about just your airline in particular, what are some of the things that Cathay is doing to be environmentally efficient, environmentally friendly?
The most important thing, of course, is investment in new and more efficient equipment. And we have both on the passenger side and the freight side. We're investing in very modern new aircraft, 777-300ERs, 747-8 freighters, A330-300s, all of which very, very efficient, very modern aircraft with efficient engines, well proven technology, but well known to be much more efficient than the equipment they're replacing, and certainly for growth they'll be good. So that's the most important thing. We're doing a lot of other things. We're really making sure that our operations are as efficient as it can be. And when I hear what other airlines have suddenly, their eyes are opened, and suddenly they find something that, well, we can do this. We've been doing these things for years. We've always been very, very efficient in terms of burning fuel at a minimal level. And of course, we also have an offset scheme. We encourage all our passengers to offset their emissions. We've had that scheme up and running now for a long time. We offset all our own corporate business travel. We allow our passengers to offset using Asia Miles, and that's a very popular option. So there's a whole range of different things that we're doing.
One thing that there's a lot of talk about, of course, is the use of biofuels and the research and development going into that. How much do you see that playing a part in the future?
It's going to be a critical part. I think it's very important that if we're going to meet these stretch targets, we're going to need to use biofuels, second generation, third generation biofuels that don't compete with the food supply for resources and don't deplete the world's water resources and so on. So it's very important that we do it in an environmentally efficient way, an environmentally friendly way. But it's absolutely critical that we do that. Cathay Pacific has recently joined the user group on sustainable fuels, and we look forward to playing an active part in the development of these new fuels.
One development we learned about that happened here in Hong Kong just recently was that the Civil Aviation Department has a new procedure for flights arriving into Hong Kong from a certain direction, which essentially will save a lot on fuel. How does something like that come about? I mean, what's involved in doing that?
Well, for a number of sort of administrative, dare I say, bureaucratic, and if you like, sort of, I was going to say political, but not really, just the interface between the various different flight information regions that you have in the Pearl River Delta, for reasons to do with that. Some of the flight paths on approach and departure from Hong Kong International Airport have, for a long time, been very inefficient in terms of the fact that you've had to fly around and around in circles, and you've had to take long diversions before you're allowed to vector in towards the approach onto the runway. So actually there's plenty of scope for making this a lot more efficient. Some of those things will depend on enhanced cooperation between the different governments that run the different flight information regions. Others will depend on better technology being applied, a new air traffic control system which Hong Kong is planning to implement over the next few years. And some are within the control of, in this case, the Hong Kong Civil Aviation Department, simply to improve procedures and make for more efficient air routes. And that's the latest one, is one of these latter ones. And we're very pleased to see it. And we know that the Hong Kong government, through the Civil Aviation Department, does understand the importance of this. But it does take time to accomplish this. And of course, safety mustn't be compromised.
Now, we know it's a very difficult time financially for many airlines. A lot of airlines are under pressure. But it seems like the last thing you need is additional pressure to be becoming environmentally efficient, which may cost you more. How do you balance out running a profitable airline and still trying to meet these sorts of targets?
Well, first of all, if we can reduce our fuel burn, of course, that's going to save us money. I mean, and if we can increase our fuel efficiency, we can do more and generate more revenue for the fuel that we're burning. So it's not a sort of a lose-lose calculation here. But we've got to accept we operate in the real world, and the real world is requiring, for good reason, improvements in efficiency and overall reductions in overall carbon footprints. And that's a fact of life, it's a fact of business, and what we have to do is find a realistic way to accomplish that and still run a profitable business, and that's part of the challenge of managing an airline in this day and age.
What do you think down the line it means for passengers? Do you think that passengers will buy into this and say, well, maybe it is going to cost me more to take a flight than it has in the past, or I have certain choices, and paying for my carbon usage is now going to be one of those elements I need to consider?
Well, I must say, so far, airlines that have provided carbon offset schemes have found them not very heavily used. We found that had that experience as well. You offer the opportunity to passengers to do the right thing, and only a few of them pick it up, to be honest. But I think the point about fares and how much passengers pay, it's always going to be driven by the market. And so airlines that can find clever ways, very efficient ways of reducing their carbon footprint will be able to market those benefits, both in terms of their communication, but also through their pricing. And again, that's part of the challenge. Airlines have a lot to do to cooperate to bring down the industry levels, but within that, we'll all be competing like crazy for that passenger dollar.